My name is Hurtado Bronzi. There, I've said it. I've said it, and I can never take it back. The secret is out. The rest? Well, if I must, sir. My name is Hurtado Bronzi, a hetman, which is to say a senior captain of the Geno 5-2 Chiliad, Imperial Army, glory of Terra, beloved of the Emperor. I am an Edessa-born man, proud of my liberty, catholic in my devotion, a brother to 2 sisters, and a brother. My ears hear only the orders of my estimable Lord Commander Namat Jira. My hands know only the purpose of the Emperor and the correct business of a carbine laser. My mouth, well, my mouth knows a great deal more and knows when not to say it. Because he has taught us to be scrupulously secretive. No, I will not be drawn to say his name. I said he has taught us to be scrupulously secretive. That is his way, and we love him for it. The greatest gift he has bestowed on us is to share his secrets with us. Why? Because we were there, I suppose, at Tel Udan and Monlo Harbor, and now the shivering hills. If it hadn't been us, it would have been others. Why are you whispering? I can hear you whispering. What don't you want me to hear? What secrets are you plotting? Pain? Is that it? Is that all you have to offer me? Well, yes, it does open secrets. Some secrets. Some mouths. What have you planned for me? Ah, I see. Well, if you must, I won't welcome it. What will it be? Eyes? Genitals? The gaps between my toes and fingers? You should know. Oh, merciful. Quite the expert, your little man. Quite the expert. He's done this before, hasn't he? No, wait, beloved Terra, shit. That little bastard. Let me finish, please. Let me finish what I was saying. Please. Yes? All right, then. This won't work. It simply won't work. Because I'm telling you it won't. I will not tell you anything. It doesn't matter what you do to me. Really, it doesn't. Burn me all you like. My mouth is shut. Because that's all he asks of us. The only thing. I can tell you who I am and who I was. But I can't. I won't betray his confidence. Oh, shit. Holy fire, bastard. What? Ask what you like. Burn me again if you must. My name is Hurtado Bronzi. That's all you're getting. Y'all let me do that whole intro with lipstick on my teeth and didn't say a word. Foul. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. So obviously we are back in Warhammer land, and two of my favorite things are happening with the book that we're exploring today. So we are in Legion, by request of one of my viewers. Thank you. So I love Legion, and of course it's by the GOAT, Dan Abnett. But one of the reasons I love it is it introduces us to two of the most interesting characters. One of them is my favorite in all of Warhammer, and the other is one of the great enigmas of Warhammer. The first is John Grammaticus. We have talked of him before. So John Grammaticus is what's called a perpetual. The perpetuals are a very rare breed of being throughout the known universe who are undying. If they lose one physical form, die, they will come back as something else, someone else, actually. So if you are a human perpetual, you will keep coming back as different humans, making that individual functionally immortal. In the Warhammer world, there are three prominent perpetuals: John Grammaticus, the Emperor of Mankind, and the Primarch Vulcan, who actually does not know he's a perpetual. To my recollection, at least the order that I've read in the Warhammer universe, Legion is the first book that blatantly introduces John Grammaticus as John Grammaticus. He is actually working on behalf of the Eldar and the Cabal, a group of Xenos who have come together to squelch this thing called humans. When humans first crawled out of the primordial ooze, the Eldar were already a very sophisticated race, and they had farseers who could look into the future and kind of determine the path of the stars and all of the myriad races that were a part of the known universe, and they saw no good in the future of humanity. But they were hoping to be the Gandalfs of the universe. You know, Gandalf doesn't do anything in Middle Earth except influence, if you're unaware of that. Like, why didn't Gandalf just take the ring with the eagles to them? He's not supposed to do that. Gandalf is, you know, a whisper in the ear. That's what he's there to do. He influences, he doesn't do. That's kind of what the Eldar position them as to the humans. They don't want to just outright obliterate, even though there are a lot of Eldar in favor of that. Let's be clear. But they want to influence the humans to take a different path. That maybe the Monki, as they refer to Terrans and humans and all of their descendants, perhaps the Monki can be saved if they are influenced to do better, be better, think better, become better. Y'all know what humans are. That was never going to work. So when the Eldar and the Cabal and different Xenospecies realize, you know what, the humans are a lost cause, and then they've got this whole emperor trying to take over the galaxy, you know, we've got to do something about this, or they're going to be a real problem for the rest of us. Not only are they going to destroy every planet that they show up on, because humans gonna human, you know, manifest destiny, but also they are going to unleash chaos on the known universe. Chaos is nice and locked up in the warp, and it needs to stay there. They're going to let it out for everybody. We've got to nip this in the bud. In the words of Barney Fife, nip it, nip it, nip it. But they can't do it alone. They need operatives within humanity. And one of those operatives that's been very good for them is John Grammaticus. Because being a perpetual, he's one of the longest lived humans, known humans in existence, next to the emperor himself. John Grammaticus in one of the books actually recalls a time that he met the emperor long ago on Terra, before it's Terra as we know it today. John Grammaticus thinks he knows how old he is, but being a perpetual, I would wager that he is much older than he realizes, especially once the Eldar get a hold of him, because they have all kinds of technology. So who knows if they've erased some older memories to kind of try to, you know, sway him in their direction. But John Grammaticus has lived long enough and enough lifetimes to be on the side of the Eldar. Like, look, I love my people. I love the humans. But yeah, we're terrible. So, what you need me to do, Eldar? So, John Grammaticus is an Eldar operative. So that's the first interesting character, at least for me, that we get introduced to in Legion. But then, who is this Legion? That's the next mystery that comes up. Now, check this out. This is really interesting. And I just dropped something on my dog. He'll be fine. But in the beginning of every Warhammer novel, you have this. The Dramatis Personae. Okay, I'm going to get it in the camera. There it is. There it is. You see where it has the Primarch? See that? I'm getting real loud in here. But you see here where it says Primarch? The Legion that we're working with, the Legion in Legion, is the Alpha Legion. One of the most covert and mysterious legions ever to be created. No, not one of, the most mysterious and covert. Their whole thing is secrecy. Here's how secret they are. So up here where it says Primarchs of the Alpha Legion. You see that? Primarch of the Alpha Legion. What does it say? What does it say? It says Alpharius. Here's part of the enigma and the mystery of the Alpha Legion. Alpharius is a twin. Alpharius is a Gemini. There's two of him. Alpharius, Omegon. And you will never hear them referred to as Alpharius and Omegon. They are one entity in two bodies, basically. Which that gives Alpharius an advantage that no other Primarch has. Because he is Alpharius Omegon, a twin, he can be two places at once and nobody would ever know. Because Alpharius Omegon are twins in every sense of the word. They walk beat for beat. And where the Alpha Legion is so different than the others is that they pride themselves on stripping their members of all of their unique qualities so that all of them are basically copies of the other. So that as they're going on their secret missions and doing whatever dirt it is they do, doesn't really matter which one of them does it and who knows what secrets because they're all just basic carbon copies of each other. It's weird. But we need to dive a little deeper into why the Alpha Legion is so unique amongst all the other Astartes legions. So, when young men, lads, and they're all boys, but don't worry, this is Warhammer, this is sci-fi, representation. If you want representation, you need to come to the sci-fi and fantasy side. You can see everything. All races, creeds, colors, genders, the whole thing. Everything is represented in sci-fi and fantasy and represented equally. Okay, off my soapbox. Anywho, all of the Legiones Astartes are male. It's just how it is. Get over it. But when young men and boys are chosen on their home planets to potentially become space marines, they are taken to undergo a series of physical and mental tasks to see if, one, can their spirits be broken enough to join the Legion? Because that's what basic training is. They got to break you down to build you up. I'm a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo. Part of becoming a black belt is the breaking down for the building up. Not quite as intense because it's not like I was in a monastery or something. But when you look at things like basic training, for the army, you look at police training when they send you off to camp, those type band camp even, that time of isolation and separation is more than just the physical preparation. It's the mental preparation as well. So they will test these young men mentally, but they're also going to test them physically because to become a space marine, they're going to take a gene seed from the Primarch that makes the Primarch a superhuman being. So he's got the gene seed from the Emperor. So, Grandpa passes it down to his son and then on to the grandkids. So they've got, a little bit more diluted gene seed, but it still turns them into a superhuman to where their body can change and morph to do things like, receive 3 hearts, have extra lungs, a thicker layer of skin. You can drink acid and not die, to be able to do that stuff. It's an incredible change that happens. And that change in that process, their version of boot camp basically, makes that person extremely loyal to their legion and to the emperor because they are stripping away everything they were before. Not that being in the imperial army isn't intense because it's still the military, but they still do things like possibly get married. They still have significant others. They're still out there, sowing seeds and planting babies everywhere. Like that still happens. In the Astartes and in the Sisters of Silence, romance, procreation, that's not part of what they do. They are only dedicated to their cause. The custodes are the same way. The custodes aren't out there having liaisons. The custodes are custodes. They guard the emperor. That's all they do. That's all they care about. Their humanity, to a degree, is stripped away from them to make them more loyal to their legion, their primarch, and the emperor than even they are to humanity itself, because once they go through their full space marine transformation, they kind of look down on ordinary humans. Like, they get a little snobby about it. If you read some of the books and hear how the Legionnaires talk about regular humans, they're just like, they never were one. Like, they were born a space marine. The Primarchs were born Primarchs. Okay, we'll let them have that. You can have your demigod snobbery. But the Space Marines started out human, but the more they war, the more they grow in their legions, the more they fight with their battle brothers, the less they remember that they had mothers and fathers and siblings and communities and religions, and they were in school or farmers or mechanic. All of that goes away. All they see is their legion, their primarch, the cause of the emperor. But the Alpha Legion takes that to a dangerous new level. All of the legions have secrets. That you can't have any type of government, army, whatever it is, without there being secrets. You think your government doesn't have secrets? They do. There's always secrets. You think a company you work for doesn't have secrets? I don't care if it's a family-owned company. They're secrets. All right? Even the secret to KFC chicken is locked in a vault somewhere. The secret formula to Coca-Cola is locked in a vault. There's always a secret. Secrets aren't necessarily bad. Sometimes secrets keep us safe. I don't want to know everything. I don't need to know. Don't tell me things I don't need to know. I like to sleep at night. All right? I'm not out there trying to be in conspiracy land. Ever. But the Alpha Legion goes, just go a little bit further. Because one, they have a twin Primarch, and no other legion does. There are 20 sons of the Emperor. Well, 18 minus the 2 that we shall not speak of. But there are 20 sons of the Emperor. With Alpharius being a twin with Omegon, there's technically 21. Here's where this is where it really shows how deep their secrecy thing is. It is debated whether the Emperor knows there is an Alpharius Omegon. Can you imagine having twins and not knowing? That is deep. Now, there's several books that explore why this information is kept from even the other Primarchs and the Emperor. Even within the Alpha Legion itself, a lot of the Astartes in that legion do not know that there's a twin Primarch. They know that they serve Alpharius, that they are Alpha Legion. Other legions are like, yeah, I'm Iron Warrior. I'm an Emperor's Children. I'm a Blood Angel. And they're like, we are Alpharius. They are a we. They are a collective. Have you watched Rick and Morty and seen the episode? I think it's in season 3. It's in season 2 with the little Borg collective that like Rick dates for, half a day. Like she's like a thing. And then there's like the little Borg to come on. They're like that. Kinda. And where the other legions outwardly make war, this is where I would say Lorgar can find another legion that is even a little bit similar to his. Remember Lorgar of the Bearers of the Word? I like the longer name. Just deal with it. But Lorgar of the Bearers of the Word, he doesn't like to subjugate planets because he sees every human life that belongs to the Emperor as something that should be spared if it can be spared. He would offer every soul to the Emperor that he could, so he does his best not to war. He can, but he'd rather not do it. He'd rather diplomat his way in, plant the religion, fly off. Here's where Alpharius is similar, is Alpharius Omegon, they usually achieve their ends through secrecy, through secret missions, through covert activities, through backdoor dealings, through battles that nobody knew was happening. There's actually one story that I want to read. I've only got it in audio form, so I'm going to have to go out and buy that particular novel. But it's about a secret Alpha Legion mission where they had to destroy a base they created themselves so that the secrets discovered on that base didn't get out into the rest of the known universe. And there are so many twists and turns in that story, and by the time you get to the end, you go, Well, when did they tell us that was gonna happen? Like M. Night Shyamalan, like I know you think you're the king of the twist, but no, no, Alpha Legion. Alpha Legion have mastered the twist. The other thing that's very interesting about the Primarchs is they very much resemble leaders of nations, diplomats of days of yore. In the modern world, we don't see our leaders going to war, mostly because they're really old, but we don't see leaders going to war. They send other people's sons and daughters to fight their battles. Let that sink in. Anyway, back to Space Marines. But I mean, that's one of the reasons the president of Ukraine is getting so many accolades. Not preaching a message for or against, but he is a leader of a country who is on the front lines with his fighting men and women. That's not something seen a lot in the modern world. In the ancient world, in the medieval world, that was the standard. You went to war. If you were going to start a battle and ask other men's sons to fight and die for your land, well, you got to go too. The kings went out to battle. The kings were on the front line as well. Did they have protection that the other people didn't? Yeah, they did. But they were still there. They were still part of the battle. That's one of the reasons Queen Elizabeth I is such a magnificent figure, is she led her armies in her wars. So that's what's happening in the Space Marine legions. Part of the reason those legions are so loyal to their Primarchs is they're not just the demigod they look up to with their gene seed. They fight alongside them. When war is made on a world, when war is made on a system, the Primarchs are right there fighting the battle with their legionaries. And that's where the Emperor made a huge mistake. By returning to Terra, leaving Horus in charge and his Primarch sons to make his war, he took himself out of a position of respect by the regular Space Marines. They had the Emperor on the front lines with them, and he said, "You know what? I got a son. Hey, son, you run things. I'm gonna go back to Terra and do secrets." And here's what's interesting. No one really knows what the Emperor's doing back on Terra when he just leaves the battlefield and leaves things in Horus's hands. But I kind of think the Alpha Legion, as you read through the Horus Heresy, they know more than they should about what the Emperor is up to under the Himalayan mountains. So that gives us a good introduction into our two main interesting characters that are here. We have John Grammaticus, the Perpetual, who goes on missions for the Cabal. And then we have the mysterious Alpha Legion, who don't like people prying into their secrets and are very close-knit and are basically clones of each other. And nobody knows that there are actually two Primarchs, Alpharius or Omegon, of that legion. The next mission that the Cabal send John Grammaticus on involves the Alpha Legion, and that's where the title of this book comes. So we're actually going to go into chapter 3 and read a couple of portions in this video. And in the next video, this first half of the story is going to end on a cliffhanger. We will uncliffhanger it in the next video. So shall we dive in? Yes, I think we shall. I've talked enough. Ha! Legion. Secrets and Lies by Dan Abnett from the Horus Heresy. Reading from chapter 3. Monlo Harbor, Nurth. 2 days later. Though John Grammaticus was over 1,000 years old, he had only been König Heineker for 8 months, and he was still getting used to the idea. According to his file, and as far as any imperial methods of scrutiny were concerned, König Heineker was 52 years old man from a region of Terra known as the Caucasus, and he served in the Imperial Army as intelligence officer attached to the Geno 5-2 Chiliad. Grammaticus still thought of himself as essentially human. He had been born human, raised as a human, and he had been human when, to all intents and purposes, he had died for the first time. Definitions became a little more complicated after that. One thing was certain. At some non-specific point after his first death, probably the result of a slow process rather than a sudden change of heart, he had stopped being quite so steadfast in his devotion to the interest of his birth species. He was still unashamedly fond of the human race, and was a stout apologist for its less edifying qualities, but he had been with the Cabal for a long time, and they had shared the acuity with him, at least in part. These days he saw what his birth race had once been, and would want to call it the long view. Grammaticus was one of the last few humans still working as an agent of the Cabal. Over the centuries, the Cabal had recruited a good many human go-betweens, but most of them were long dead, forgotten, or disavowed. The Cabal had been recruiting human agents for as long as there had been humans to recruit, a fact Grammaticus always found particularly hard to reconcile. At the very start of human history, before writing, before Earl, before Catalhayuk, before Mohenjo-daro and Thebes, before the construction of the lost monuments, the Cabal had visited Terra and encountered a breed of unprepossessing, unpromising mammalian hominids, busy making its first axe marks on the trunks of ancient woodland trees to mark out its first boundaries. The Cabal had seen some particular quality in those mammalian hominids. They had recognized that the hominids would one day rise inexorably to play a pivotal role in the scheme of all things. Mankind would become the greatest weapon against the primordial annihilator, or it would become the primordial annihilator's greatest weapon. Either way, the Cabal decided that the unprepossessing mammalian hominids developing on a backwater world were not a species to be dismissed. Grammaticus knew this, and this fact frustrated most of the Cabal's inner circle. They were old kinds, every damn one of them, and regarded all upstart species of the galaxy as inferior ephemera. It pained him to accept that their destiny, all destinies, lay in the purview of creatures that had been simple single-celled protocytes when the old kind cultures were already mature. Gahet had once told Grammaticus that the Cabal had made its first subtle advances toward the human species long before the advent of the Age of Terra. Gahet had said this bitterly, and more bitterly still, had admitted the Cabal's repeated failure to apply influence on human development. "You've always been feral, stubborn brutes," Gahet had said, "shockingly dogmatic in your self-worth. We tried to direct you and influence your course. It was like..." Gahet had paused, allowing his mind to select an appropriately humocentric smile. "It was like commanding a tide to turn back," he finished. Grammaticus smiled. "We are headstrong people, aren't we?" he had replied with no little pride. "Did you not think it might have been easier to cull us before we grew teeth?" Gahet nodded, or at least he had flexed his secondary nostrils in a mannerism that equated a nod. "That was not our way then. We all deemed such notions as gross barbarism. All of us except Slough Daw, of course." "Of course. And now?" "Now, I regret we did not abort you when we had the chance. Destruction has become our only tool in latter days. I miss the subtle methods." Almost all of the humans recruited down the years had proved to be unviable or flawed. Most had been disposed of. Grammaticus believed that he had succeeded where so many others had failed because of his gift. John Grammaticus was a high-function psyker. So this is really interesting where we are. Yeah, pause. So Grammaticus is getting his orders, latest orders from the Cabal. He is in the guise of an Imperial army member, Koenig Heineker, so that he can infiltrate a planet where he can go find whoever it is the Cabal wants him to find and do a thing. There's a lot that happens in between, but that's not the interesting part. We're going to skip to the last portion of this chapter where an interesting encounter happens that sets the story of Legion in motion, and then we'll pick up there in our next reading together. So let's get to. Monlo was waking up. As a city girded to the expectation of assault, it never truly slept, but its habits followed a circadian ebb and flow. The outer walls were well defended by squadrons of Equinorth, by iron mortars and bombast, and by platoons of the regular North Day ground troops. They loitered in unruly spitting gatherings around the heavy steps of the city's thick walls, or stood on the wall's fighting platforms, watching the distant, unmoving enemy through spyglasses. Deeper in the city, the rhythmic pulse of life was easier to discern. Markets woke up. Merchants announced their wares. Morning devotions were declaimed by strong-lunged priests. Water carriers called their services as they wandered the plazas and in the winding cobbled streets and lanes. Grammaticus retraced his steps, trying to recall the specific layout of the place he had experienced the first time. Passing merchants and elders nodded. They made all the sunlight gestures to him as they acknowledged his status. He made the gesture back. Grammaticus wanted to get into the northern suburb area, an area called Kurnal, so he could get a good look at the city's north wall. Tuvi would appreciate his efforts. He stood aside to let a Grox cart trundle past. Street washers cleaned the cobbles with bristle brooms and pails of water, using spades for the animal dung. They sang as they worked. The faience tiled walls of the port city glimmered around him in the morning sun, showing reeds and reptiles in the mosaic. The Nerthine had no street names, just pictorial emblems. He looked at a particular symbol, a great monitor lizard, delineated in cherry red tiles, and he knew with a trained certainty that he had never seen it before. He made a wrong turn. Monlo was so complex, so interwoven, it was hard to recall the specific plan. It was like Arcane's web, mousy, big-bosomed. Arachne. He was a needle, he fancied, her needle, moving through the net of fate. He halted and took a moment to consider. His internal compass was out. He checked with the rising sun and established where he was. He slowed his breathing and allowed himself to perspire for a minute, just to stabilize his body. He had his bearings again. He'd just gone a street too far west, that was all. Karnal district was over to his left. Except it wasn't. He halted again, refusing to allow panic to dig in. A water carrier came up to him and offered a ladle of water. "No, thank you," Grammaticus said. "God love you anyway," the carrier replied, moving on. Grammaticus shivered. What the water carrier had actually said literally translated as, "The primordial annihilator immolate your living soul." What's wrong with me? Grammaticus thought. Last time I was here, I slipped easily from street to street. This time, I'm behaving like an amateur. My head is swimming. This is stupid. He crossed through 2 more busy streets looking for familiar landmarks. It felt as if Karnal district was further away than ever. It was as if something was distracting him, baffling his abilities. On impulse, he reached into a bag of mineral salts hooked to his broad overbelt and closed his fingers around the mem seed hidden in the salt. The seed was the size of an earlobe, set in a small silver clasp. Gehet had given it to him. The seeds, fruited from some xenotype tree on a world somewhere in the Cabal's range of influence, were psychically sensitive. If they grew warm or desiccated in any way, it was a sign that psychic activity was close by. Grammaticus looked at the mem seed. It was always a little warm and dry because it reacted to his own talents. In his hand, the seed was positively hot. Like a burning coal, it had shriveled in its setting. He was in trouble. The mem seed screamed a warning that something was nearby, perhaps something haunting him. Desal Hulta? Grammaticus looked over his shoulder and saw a portly merchant waving at him. The man had been standing in conversation with a group of his brethren on the steps counting house, but he left them to hurry over. Grammaticus quickly put the mem seed away. What's his name? His name? You've met him before. Desal, my good fellow, the portly merchant declared, making the all-sunlight gesture and adding a bow. I've missed your face at the market these last few days. What news of the fire brick deal we sketched out on our last meeting? Has your supplier delivered? Hidek Rutun. That was his name. Hidek, my good fellow, I am pained to respond that my supplier has become a goat's maw, Grammaticus answered politely. Taking more than it gives, it turns out I can't deliver on that fire brick deal. I apologize. Hidek waved his pudgy hand. Oh, don't worry. I quite understand. In these times of hardship and oppression, with alien siege at our door, things like this happen. He looked at Grammaticus more earnestly. You have my fetish, my gene print. Yes? Good. We can deal in future. I look forward to receiving your envoy. I am always your servant, Hidek, Grammaticus mumbled. He made the sign of all sunlight and added the gesture of the moon's entire as he ended the meeting. He strode down the length of the street, feeling as uneasy and as lost as before. Then he hurried into an open square where the foot traffic was lighter, hoping the freedom of the space would give him room to clear his head and perhaps identify the source of the psychic activity the seed detected. Clarity obstinately refused to come. Grammaticus paused and slowly raised his eyes. He was standing in the Pakel Awan Nerth, the square of the preeminent temple in Mon Lo. High above him on the temple's tympanum, a bas-relief frieze showed the four properties of the primordial annihilator: death, ecstasy, morality, and mutability, blending together into one huge ghastly symbol of unity. What gross mistake had led his feet here? What clumsy misturn! This was the last place in the city he would have visited voluntarily. The tympanial symbol seemed to pulse, to throb, pressing his eyeballs back into their sockets. Sunlight flared and buzzed. He gagged and forced hot reflux back down into his gut. His previous visit hadn't been anything like this. It was as if the city had become aware of him, as his role as an intruder, and had become a web spun to trap him. Someone, something, was playing with him. The vomit wasn't going to stay down. He hurried off into an alley away from the temple precinct and bent over in the shadows to release the acid liquid. It rushed out of him in a geyser. He barely had time to drag his head shawl off. He sank to his knees, trembling and spitting. 2 figures. 2 men who were just dark shadows were moving down the alley towards him. They weren't rushing, but there was a purposeful, urgent stride to their gait. Grammaticus got to his feet and made off in the opposite direction, with equal purpose, not quite running. 3 more figures rounded the opposite end of the long, winding alley and came towards him. What were they? Militia? Equinerth? Agents of the Pakal on one? The temple's zealous doctrinal clerics? The alley had a couple of side turnings along its length. Grammaticus took the first and broke into a run as soon as he was out of sight of the figures closing in on him. He reached a dead end, a closed courtyard behind some tall, fine townhouses. He heard footsteps approaching behind him. He tried the doors and found all of them bolted, except a heavy gate of painted wood, where green reptiles intercoiled, and they made a helical pattern. Grammaticus pushed the gate open and ducked into the blessed cool and darkness of the room beyond it. He closed the gate and drew the bolt across it to hold it. He waited, listening to the muffled footsteps and voices outside. A gigantic hand, gloved in steel, reached out in front of the darkness and picked him up by the neck. It turned him around and slammed him back against the wall, holding him by the throat. Grammaticus was being throttled, his feet kicking off the ground. The steel hand pressed him back against the wall. Terracotta brickwork ground into his back. I have a suspicion, a deep voice said, coming out of the darkness. You've been looking for me, John Grammaticus. It knew his name. That's possible, Grammaticus gasped, though it might depend on who you are. My name? You know my name, you treacherous bastard. My name is Alpharius. What a way to meet a Primarch, right? So, Grammaticus is in the presence of Alpharius, Omegon. Alpharius or Omegon. We don't know right now because that's how the Alpha Legion is. They're secretive. But this actually was one of my favorite reads. It's right up there with me with the Angel Exterminatus and Vulcan. So yeah, we're going to read a little bit more from this in our next meeting. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you. Please like, comment, subscribe. I decided to read from Legion at the suggestion of a subscriber. So thank you for giving the suggestion. I forgot how great this book was. It was nice to dive back into it. And we are this close to 500 subscribers. I have got my nerdy prize pick for when we hit 500 on YouTube. So just come on, y'all, get me there. But no, thank you to all who have subscribed, who comment, who share my videos, because you don't have to be here. And you are. And when one of my other social media, whether it's the Facebook, the Instagram, to Twitter, you know how we feel about Twitter right now. When one of those gets to 500, next nerdy prize goes out to represent the milestone. So I've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you in the next one.